Well, we are going to get started and want to welcome everyone to this session. I'm excited that you joined us today, where we're going to talk about how multi-sector strategies can advance systems level change. And this is one, I'm Jonathan Briggs, I'm the moderator, I'm policy manager with America Forward. And this is really, we feel, a timely discussion because this is an opportunity to think about how systems level change can take place. So today this session is going to address the what are multi-sector strategies, what does that look like, the why should we approach, work the way that we're going to discuss today, why is this important for you, and then the how you can go about embracing and really implementing multi-sector strategies in your own unique context. So in just a second, I'm going to introduce each of our wonderful panelists to share more about themselves and specifically their name, their mission, and then just one or two priorities that you have. And I'll start with you, Camille, and then we'll just work our way down.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Camille Christina Terry. I'm the CEO of ChargerHope. We provide technology solutions for EV charging maintenance. And the two priorities that we'll be hitting on today is how do we ensure reliability through policy? That's really important to us in regards to the actual uptime of charging stations. And also, how do we ensure that it's the right folks that are working on those problems? And super excited to be here and share some of the work that we've done.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Abby Marquand. I am a partner at New Profit, and I lead our economic mobility work at New Profit. And New Profit is, for those who don't know, a venture philanthropy organization that was started by social entrepreneurs for social entrepreneurs. And really what we do is bring the rigor of venture capitalism to the humanity of the social sector, the nonprofit sector, and we invest directly in social entrepreneurs. And that's really the heart of our work. And just to say a quick word about proximity, it is core to our strategy, the way that we invest. We really believe in centering the lived experiences of the constituents that organizations serve by investing in leaders who share those experiences. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Adrian Pedroza. I'm the executive director of Abriendo, Puertas, Opening Doors. Great to be here. We work with families with young children, birth to 8 years old. We work in 41 states with 500 implementing partners, from Head Starts to Catholic Charities to YMCA's, community-based organizations. And we work to honor and support parents as their child's first teacher and advocate. Our priorities are to really elevate the voice of parents, elevate their needs, their hopes, dreams, and aspirations for their children. And we work as proximate partners with New Profit and New America to really ensure that we're listening deeply to what families and parents are saying about their most pressing challenges and also their most pressing needs.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here, and just thank you all for being here and all the work that you do. My name is Jessica Gunderson. I'm with the Partnership for Children and Youth. We're an intermediary organization, which means we're really trying to bridge policy and practice, and we're trying to expand access and quality of after-school and summer programs. What we're focused on is the tens of billions of dollars in stimulus funding and investments Californians are making. And what we see is too often both funders and policymakers, once the bill's passed or the funding's passed, they kind of move on. And we'll never have the impact we want unless you follow that through. So that's really our mission, is to make it real on the ground.
So I want to dive right in, and I really appreciate what you just shared, Jessica, about how policymakers kind of move on and there's no continued momentum around specific issues. But I think also, like, maybe, an idea or an assumption that exists for the audience is that a multi-sector approach, though ideal, is difficult to do. So bringing together multiple stakeholders, competing priorities, folks with different kind of outcomes and end goals that they have is going to be again, something that is a good thing to do, but a difficult thing to do, and maybe therefore less appealing. And so I would love for you all to really clarify that for us, getting to the what. Why do you think a multi-sector approach is necessary? How does your organization take a multi-sector approach? And then what does that look like in practice for you?
Oh, sure. So for us, just like so number one, ChargerHelp, we're in 11 states. We service about 20,000 charging stations. We have about 35 employees. and we are going to be national by the end of December. Just some facts that'll help answer this question is that today, a lot of people may not know, but 30 to 50% of the current EV charging infrastructure is inoperable. 80% of those issues are non-electrical. They're software issues, communication issues. And what we've done is we decentralized fuel. So these charging stations are literally everywhere. So there isn't like one group of folks that can necessarily take care of them. What it did do for us at ChargerHope, it allowed us to have a unique opportunity to elevate both technology and people. That we said that we need the problem-solving ideals of folk, and we also needed technology to aggregate those ideals in order to solve the issues we saw out in the field. So I start with that because for us, what we were able to do on the recent infrastructure bill, that was $7.5 billion, was that on the first guideline, the guideline was 97% uptime per charging station. And I have no qualms to say that is a direct result of my little voice hopping around, reading those facts. And so for us, when we read the facts and we showed that there was a true problem and we were able to quantify those things, and then on top of that, we have a good story. Like, I'm from South Central LA, my co-founder's from Compton, 62% of my technicians are Black and brown. 32% of them are veterans. And so the solution was a holistic, equitable solution and a story that people could be excited about. So when we had conversations with politicians and we were able to just get to the point and not only say like, hey, here's an issue, this is how we solve it, and this is actually a more holistic way to solve it. It was easy for us to do, what we did with the federal bill. And the last thing that I'll say, which I think is important, is that we also looked at how do we protect the way that we built our business to ensure that it's a model for others, right? Just because ChargerHope hires Black and brown, EVSE techs and pays them a good wage, how do we ensure that that's for others? So my co-founder, Evette, she created an ONET code with the Department of Labor. And so EVS technicians, it's a real job now, and it doesn't require a college degree. And the minimum payment on it is $30. So it was just really neat to, one, see how do we identify a problem? How do we quantify it? How do you make it a story that people can get excited about it? And so then it doesn't matter what sector you go into next because people are rallying to be on your side. Thank you.
I never tire of hearing the ChargerHelp, mission and story and the work. And ChargerHelp is an example of an organization that New Profit has partnered with and invested in. And I know those of us in the room who work on social impact know that kind of systems change that Camille just described. It's really, really hard, but it's the necessary work if we want to get to scale. And that kind of multi-sector approach is the necessary work if we want to get to the kind of impact I know that all of us care about. And at New Profit, we're thinking about that all the time, both through investing in social entrepreneurs like Camille and her co-founder, but also thinking about like public systems and how they work and how innovation interacts with public systems, not just on the policy side, but we've thought about this a lot in the economic mobility space around workforce systems and higher education and the way that innovators interact with public workforce systems. So through the Future of Work Grand Challenge, which is an initiative that's ongoing at New Profit, we really are trying to bring innovation to workforce development boards, recognizing that if we want to get to scale and if we care about equity, that's where we really can make an impact. And it is hard work. John, you said it, like it's hard. The systems change work is hard, but it's important. And there are layers of it that require innovation, that require testing, experimenting, but really de-risking that kind of innovation for the public sector that is far more resource constrained, than the private sector tends to be, but also then lifting that up and bringing voices like ChargerHelp and other folks here today, and so many people here at this conference, bringing the voices of the people doing the work and the people whose lived experiences are directly impacted by this work to the table with policymakers to make lasting change. And so that's something that's just central to the way we think about the work at New Profit across all the issues that we work in. And, economic mobility is one of them, but education is another really important space for us. And we're really thinking about this in multiple layers. One thing I just also want to call out is that, The constituent voice piece, yes, the social entrepreneurs we invest in are just so important in the conversation, but also the workers. In the case of economic mobility, it's workers. In the case of education, it's parents, it's students. How do we lift up the voices of those who are directly impacted by this work? In economic mobility, we created a worker advisory board, and that has been really, really important to advancing, the mission of our organization and the mission of the social entrepreneurs that we invest in. So that's, another example of kind of multi-sector, but also proximity, like recognizing that we have to engage across a number of different vantage points, but who's at the table really matters. So thanks.
Yeah, and I would say who's at the table and who's shaping, right, the agenda. I really feel that multi-sector work is about allowing stakeholders to do what they do best, but still be a part of a collective movement, right? As I was engaging with some of you, the audience, members here before the session, we're in the early childhood space at Abriendo Puertas, right? We work with families with young children, but I saw a connection point to almost everyone I spoke to, and a sort of a potential solution, right? A potential identification of how we can work together, right, towards a common cause. In the early childhood space, right, I've been doing this work for about 25 years. We have seen the most incredible, bold results and investments come from multi-sector work, right? Engaging the business community around how early childhood education matters to them, right? We heard that from, one of the speakers earlier. Remind me of the name. It was, he runs the childcare, one of the largest childcare providers, and he works, Bright Horizons, there we go. And he works with employers, right, to bring early childhood, high quality early childhood development and education, right, to employers. In the early childhood space, we've worked with the military, right? We've had generals come out and say that quality early childhood education is is essential to national security, right? We've had generals say that and advocate. We've worked with the government sector, right, talking about growing, right, quality early childhood education, right, going upstream to the prenatal to 3 years old, when a large part of brain development, 90% of a child's brain develops in those first early 3 years. So it really has taken that multi-sector work to really get the attention, right? Any civil rights movement, any large, public health movement has come across through multi-sector work, right? Any win, any victory we've seen has really been cut across, right, different sectors. So the question I always ask is, who are those unlikely partners that we haven't spoken to? Who are those folks that we're engaging, that we might think, right, aren't impacted by our issue, but that when we reach across, right, from government to nonprofit to the private sector, right, to military, right, how can we gain them as partners to get that victory, to get that win, to really close, right, that inequity gap that we're all working towards in our particular area of work?
Well said. I want to use an example. So we ran the Summer Matters campaign, which was a statewide campaign in California to bring summer learning experiences to all young people and change the narrative around summer school, punitive programs to blended academics and enrichment. And why that was successful, one is we had a funder, the Packard Foundation, 7 years, right? How many of us have to keep going back to funders year after year? And it's wasting time. So 7 years, we had a policy agenda, we had a communications agenda, we also had demonstration projects across the state of California. So we were testing out, what does summer programs look like in different communities run by different people? The other thing is you have to go to the funders and say, you can't just fund us, right? They were funding schools, they were funding the School Boards Association, so we were really spreading the money around. That's how you first bring people to the table, is money, right? But then over time, when they see it firsthand and see the impact they have and how much it's really across the board benefiting, we saw that to be really, really successful. And again, multiple years, the funding, the grant making has to go to a lot of different entities as well, and start with practice. We weren't starting with what I thought should happen in Sacramento. We started with what were the highest quality programs across the state of California and brought those leaders to tell that story and really build the impact from the student level all the way up to how we were changing what policymakers were thinking about summer, including superintendents and many others. So that's, I just want to give a nod to Packard because a lot of people don't do it like that. So, and it made a difference.
I really I feel like I heard a lot about proximity and the power of proximate leaders who understand this work in very unique ways that I think policymakers just don't get. Being in an office on the Hill, or working in a governor's office, there's just a disconnect that exists that I think is natural. And one thing I didn't add was that America Forward, the organization I work for, is the nonpartisan policy initiative of New Profit, the venture philanthropy. And what we do every day is we advocate on behalf of our 100 plus coalition of social innovation organizations in education, workforce, and pay for success. And that could be anything from, pushing a piece of legislation with the Hill office to, making a regulatory change with the federal agency, to even smaller things, right? And I think a lot of that trickles down to the state and local level. And I think this idea of like multi-sector is also like, how can we bring all of those different players together to move things both coming from the top down and also coming from the bottom up, right? But I think, Abby, you touched on this really quickly, and it was that I know New Profit is really kind of this unique place in the partnership with New Profit and America Forward, where, it both plays in the philanthropic space and the investor space, and you all have been leading the Future of Work Grand Challenge, specifically working with Brandeis University, MIT Solve, Jobs for the Future, with some really interesting insights coming out, but I think also deeply rooted in proximity. And I think that's tied to local workforce boards. I know you touched on this briefly, but just wanted to see if you can speak to, or at least draw the connection for us between the work that you are doing with your partners and how it has the potential to provide innovative solutions for challenges that are well known but hard to solve. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, partnership is just core to everything we do, period, but especially as it relates to systems change. And, when we designed the Future of Work Grand Challenge, which is, one of our kind of major initiatives under the economic mobility banner, our team spent months really talking to people who are in the field. And that's, certainly other funders in this space, policymakers, but employers as well, workforce boards, like people on the ground doing the work to really understand what are the challenges, where is philanthropic capital helpful to move the needle here? And we needed to hear from partners what those challenges were. And what came out of that was really a bold idea around how we could disrupt and de-risk innovation for that sector. We didn't know if it was gonna work or not, and we're still, we're in year 3 of this challenge, so, TBD on whether it works the way we wanted to, but the whole point was to design an experiment, really, but informed by what we were hearing from the field from our partners. And core to getting the work done was also the partners you mentioned. So we know that in the field, there's just so much expertise. So many people are represented here at this conference from the organizations you named, JFF, Brandeis University, MIT Solve. We worked with the X Prize Foundation, and we really wanted to create something that would be, so disruptive that we would really learn something from it. So, when we talk about that work, it really is, so much of it is about the partners that have been at the table, but it continues to be about the social entrepreneurs that we invested through that work and what we're learning from them about what it means to actually implement tech-enabled rapid reskilling or workforce development solutions within the public sector, and also what we've learned from the workers on our worker advisory board, who are many of them who are underemployed or who were unemployed when the pandemic hit, what they're looking for in terms of economic opportunity, and really making sure that we center their voices. So yeah, it's about partnership, but back to like who are those partners and how do we engage them? It's really critical that we constantly center, the people who are directly impacted in the work. And through America Forward, it's another great example of partnership, because we're coming at this problem from 2 different sides, like one from the practice side and one from the policy side, but we're coming to the same sorts of solutions. So I think that's a really important way to approach this.
Mm-hmm. And, Evette, I'm sorry, Camille, I saw you. I said Evette because that's your co-founder who wasn't here today. But, I saw you nodding your head because I know that you all were a part of the Future of Work Grand Challenge as a grantee. But I think you also briefly spoke about the bipartisan infrastructure plan that Biden-Harris administration passed last year, and, them really devoting a portion of those funds towards electric vehicle charging stations across the nation, and the amazing work that you all did to kind of like tap, percents and have those dollars go towards where they need to go best. And so I really would love if you can kind of speak to both. I think, you've been doing the work as a partner, but you've also been doing the work on your own through your own kind of individual advocacy. Can you speak to some of that work and how you've, leveraged relationships in the philanthropic and policy spaces to drive change? And I think it's just an add-on to like what you'd already shared around maybe even going a little bit more into kind of the detail of like what that process was like when you worked to develop that bill or support developing it.
Yeah, no, sure. I think taking a step back, the way that we've defined ChargerHope, what we're doing, we call it good business. A lot of times people are, they'll call us social entrepreneurs, or they'll call us these different things, or even when we talk about equity, it always feels so soft and squishy. But for us, when we look at a true bottom line of the profitability of a company, to me, I don't even see it as a triple bottom line. Those things collapse into one another. So it's whether you are a gig economy technology company and you pay people poorly up front, and then you get dragged through the media later, or you get protests happening to you, or people boycott from working with you. Like, that's a hit to your bottom line. You're just not calculating it, right? And so when we looked at ChargerHelp, the first thing that I knew was that the people that worked for the company, they had to be bought into the ideal. Like, they had to be prideful of the work that they were doing. And that meant you had to pay them well, right? So it wasn't like a nice to have or a cute thing. It was like, no, like, actually, I don't want my workers to have 3 and 4 jobs. I want them to have 1 job. And I also want them to be happy when they come to work. So I offer them equity and healthcare. And I say all these things because I'll connect it later. But for us, it was so important for us to start establishing that, like, the way that we've called companies successful is because we haven't been measuring the right things. Right? And so I think that that's the perspective that being a technology company as ChargerHelp is that we're not social entrepreneurs. I want to make a lot of money, right? I've been poor. I grew up poor. Like, I would like to make a lot of money. However, I don't believe that in order for me to make a lot of money, that means that my workers don't also have to share in that. Like, that's a weird thing to say, right? That in order for folks to be doing well, everyone else have to be doing poorly. To me, it's lazy. And so at ChargerHelp, we think critically about these things. And so when we do go to Biden-Harris, or we do go to these folks, I'm not approaching them as a social entrepreneur that has a bleeding heart for saving the community. I'm approaching us like, actually, this is just the way that you should do it. And everyone else that has been doing it incorrectly. And let me show you the news articles of why they've been doing it incorrectly and how there's a cost to that brand later on. A whole CEO got kicked out of a company because he was doing wild things. So like these things come back to you. So for us, when we ground in that and start shifting these conversations around like what good business is, like what is true profitability, like how do we really measure that, you have a stronger foundation to stand on, because it's not about then how you feel, right? It's about, no, this just makes sense for this business to be successful. And on top of that, 30 to 50% of your infrastructure is inoperable. You're going to invest $7.5 billion into a thing that's only going to work half the time. That's crazy talk. So that's how it really was, for us. And I think like that's why we were successful. And the last thing I'll say with the partnership with New Profit is that it's interesting. My co-founder, Evette, she worked with the Department of Labor for 10 plus years and worked with workforce development centers. And so both of us have a very interesting perspective on the role of workforce development centers that you don't often see in tech. Folk in tech don't work workforce development centers because they don't move fast enough. Right? And so when we started to work with them, because we, number one, believe that this is a great cost saving for us in regards to recruitment, to go to a community center that's going to do recruitment and training and all these things. If I look at that as a cost saving, then I'll invest the time in figuring out how to make it work for us, right? And so we had a lot of learnings through the program out of Massachusetts. But we end up hiring people from there. We work with them now. And we've been able to utilize that to bring in other tech companies to work in these spaces. So I guess to summarize all of that, I would love to see us get to a place where we really start identifying what actually makes a company good, what actually makes them successful, and that it shouldn't be these 3 separate categories. Like, we can quantify all these things to show how it does impact profit. And I think that if we can figure that out, I think that there is a lot of opportunity to move things faster, and it's less about someone's personal opinion and more so about where you're going to lose money. And that's the thing, that money talks. We all know that, we see it, but that's all.
Yeah, you made me think about, which I think is a question I'm going to throw at Jessica in just a second, but I wanted to tag on to what you were saying, being a social entrepreneur. And Adrian, you were doing such amazing work. One as a coalition member, but also I think around kind of our whole learner initiative, focusing on social emotional learning and the power that has to really kind of invite students into the classroom, working in deep partnership with the community, with parents. And so I would just love for you, I think that, that advocacy work looks a little differently than like moving away from workforce and kind of the challenges that exist there with the enormous amount of challenges that exist in education. And so I would love if you can speak to, how philanthropic partnerships helped to position your organization and its movement around the whole learner initiative, social emotional learning, but just think more broadly, some of the key priorities you have.
Yeah, well, that's a big question, right? And so when I think about whole learners, right, and our support of the whole child, of the whole family, right, I think of we need the whole of a community, right, coming together across sectors to work on solutions. So with this work, when America Forward kind of came to us and engaged us in this whole learner work that they were doing, we automatically said, yes, it absolutely makes sense, of course. During the pandemic, this work started before the pandemic, but during the pandemic was front and center, right? The needs that families were facing, right? Had multi-sector needs, multi-sector solutions, right? We were talking about health, we were talking about workforce, we were talking about pay, we were talking about sick leave, we were talking about all these different issues and how they connected to child well-being, right? To ensure that our children were set up, right, from day one, to be successful in their learning, to be successful as people, as human beings in relationship, right, with the community at large. So for us, it's easy, right, to say yes to work with Lego Foundation and to work, with other, for-profit companies and New Profit and America Forward and many other, right, groups. But what matters, right, to us in our work at Abriendo Puertas, right, is that relational work that takes place every day in community, right, in childcare centers, in homes, with schools, right, in partnership with schools, right, and to understand that it's that ongoing everyday work, right, that those stories that families are sharing with us, right, to understand that how can we leverage, right, how can we ensure that those voices go heard, right, and partners like America Forward help us to do that because we are not in the halls every day, on the ground in Washington, D.C., or partners like in states like in California or New Mexico where we have other coalition advocacy organizations, right? Like our friend here who are in the ears of policymakers, right, day in, day out, right, sharing and helping to elevate these stories. Those partners are essential in order for us to move an agenda forward, and we recognize that, right? It's funders really understanding philanthropy, understanding that it's contribution versus attribution, right? That we can't do it all alone, right? We are one part of the puzzle, right? But when we can contribute to a collective, right? When we're a part of contributing, right? Where our voice matters to America Forward, we know that, right? In that relationship, we know that voice matters because the voice of everyday families that we're in relationship, right, matters. So we seek out those relationships, right? In the collective, right? In this cross multi-sector work where our work matters, right? And where we also recognize and we honor, right, that the work of our partners here, sitting up here, matters because we're all a piece of that puzzle. We all make up, right, part of that work and we're working towards something, right, greater than ourselves or greater than our individual work. Funders, as far as philanthropy, it's got to be a trusting relationship, right? It's got to be where we understand that when philanthropy invests, when a funder invests in us, they're investing in me as a leader, right? I'm a new executive director to this role. I've been in this work a long time, but in many ways, it's they're investing in me as a leader. They're investing in community and those parents that we're in relationship with, right? But you're investing in people, in those very key, right, interactions every day. Proximate work that happens through our collective work.
Yeah, and I feel like you said a lot of everyone just said a lot of great things that kind of brings me to you, Jessica, because I think that the tension that exists, I think, in kind of one, having those relationships, being able to act on relationships is probably a huge barrier for a lot of folks, especially if they're not a part of a coalition or they, aren't able to really take the time out to do those things. And so I would love for you to speak to that. But I think the other piece is this all sounds great, but I think that Camille got to it, that there also are challenges that are just baked into the system that makes this work really hard. And you as an intermediary kind of sit at the middle point of having to navigate both sides, or what are the challenges are. You navigate those things and can really offer, I think, the real perspective here, or maybe a bit more clarity around, what are we forgetting, in this conversation, if there is anything. What are the challenges that make this work difficult? And then, how have you navigated this work as an intermediary?
Yeah, well, I want to talk about attribution, because if I'm doing my job right, I don't want to get attribution. Attribution should be coming to the teachers, the families, and the parents. And so that can be really hard for fundraising, because funders want that, they want that recognition. And so, again, I'm doing my job if you don't know who I am. I need to be behind the scenes and really putting the experts first. So that's a major struggle for all of us, is because people are trying to get their name out there. That's how you get that money, And that's not the way we go about it, because if you don't know who I am, then I'm doing my job right. You should know the names of all the after-school workers, the Boys and Girls Clubs, the YMCAs. So really rethinking about attribution, too, is we need to be opportunistic to make change. And sometimes funders are real rigid about this plan that you committed to, right? The only reason PCY has been successful is because we are reevaluating and we're flexible and nimble. And every time we get an opportunity, we take it because we have to. So I think that's really important and essential too. And just again, I think it's a lot of the behind the scenes work that people don't talk about, and that relationship building is so essential. But again, my job is to put the worker, the young person, this CBO leader in front of folks and not me. And because they're the expert. And that's really the work of an intermediary, is lifting up the voices of the experts. And two, I want to talk about coherence, because there's not this intentional feedback loop built into policy. So what happens is we can pass a bill, it sounds good, we can pass the money, but then who's watching the RFP, right? Who's making sure that terms that are being used at the administrative level, and it's not just enough administrative, right? So I can go to Department of Education and push there. No, then I got to go to each superintendent, the 1,300, right? You have to build coherence for real change to happen, and that's where people just get lazy, and it's also not sexy, right? So again, the funders don't like the unsexy stuff. The unsexy is reading 100 pages of guidance and trying to make sure, because the devil's in the details. That's really what matters. And then also, how is it being implemented? What feedback loops do we have? Because there's not always checks and balances, right? So you really have to keep going back and saying, is it working, bringing it back? So, I mean, it's really, for us, it's about coherence and, again, more intentional feedback loops in the policy system, and they don't exist. And so all of us, need to do that work together, and just keep reminding those policymakers, not just to feel good when they voted on something or passed something, but feel good when change is being made and the trajectory of young people is changing.
Love that. And thank you. That was, just thank you for that, because I think that was so important to share. And, I would just love for you each to, in our last, 6 minutes that we have, lightning quick, if you could, but it's also fine to kind of give a little bit more time for yourself. What's one thing that gives you hope about this work? And leaving everyone with that, and I think it's also thinking about the challenge. But what's one thing that gives you hope about this work?
Yeah, that we can do hard things.
That was lightning quick. That was good. No, but yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I think we can do hard things, and the conversations that are happening on the stages across this conference, I think, give me hope. There's a lot of cross-sector conversations happening. I think the next phase is operationalizing those things, and we've heard money talks, yeah, and and what you described, Jessica, around the need for investors and funders to trust who they fund to do the work, how that looks, that's core to the way New Profit thinks about itself in this space, is really trusting the organizations, the social entrepreneurs that we invest in, and recognizing also that people's time is valuable and partnership is valuable. It costs money. We should fund that hard work of bringing people together to make this change. I feel hopeful that we are coming together and hopeful that we can inspire, resources to this sort of approach.
I feel hopeful that we have multiple sessions at this conference. It's my first time at this conference, but that have Proximate, or leading with Proximate in the title, and that we're looking within communities that are hurting the most, that are most underserved for the solutions, and investing in those leaders, right, that are doing that proximate work every day. That's what makes me hopeful.
I mean, young people give me hope, because they ask the question, why? Why is it being done like this? Just because it's always been done this way? And they challenge my assumptions. I have assumptions that have been baked into me, right? So young people will call you out. They're not scared to do that. So that's what gives me hope, is we should all be asking why. Why has it always been this way, right? Let's rethink some of these things. And then the other thing is we're really finding new spaces to honor learning outside a traditional classroom, right? So that's what we're trying to change, is I don't want the agrarian calendar. I don't want schools to look the same way they did 100 years ago. And I really think what I've seen, at least in the last 10 years, is people are honoring that time that happens in the summer, in between. It doesn't have to just be coming from a teacher. It can be from your parent, your neighbor, right? So how are we just giving more value to how we spend time and really rethinking, the old traditional school model didn't work, hasn't worked, and let's get over it. So I see that change happening in a way that I hadn't seen for a while. And again, let's go start with the young people and ask them, and then follow from there.
I love that, and I think that it really just kind of sums up all of what was discussed here. I think hopefully you all are leaving with a better understanding of what multi-sector approaches are, how you interpret that, how you understand it, how you apply it, and I think also how you iterate on it. I think that was probably the most important piece, is that it doesn't end with you passing a piece of legislation or having a conversation with a policymaker or building a relationship with someone. But I think it's how you continue to grow those things and think about those things. And also I think it's tricky with policy, is that things always are, you have to think about that too, and how people can, there can be unintended consequences to the things that you put in bill text. So I want to thank all of the panelists. Thank you so much for, just the time, for your reflections, and thank you all for joining us for today. And I think we're going to end it there. So thank you.